Howdy, y'all. Sounds like I guess we're missing Maverick, so I'll go ahead and get started with my 5 minutes. 2 days ago, I was actually just presenting on campus. I'm a student here at Texas A&M. I guess if I had met Jeff a little bit earlier, maybe I would have changed my mind. But yeah, I'm an MBA here at the Mays School of Business, and that is a decision that I didn't make lightly. I've put both myself and my wife in a little bit of debt right now. Who's actually in the crowd in the corner over there. But I did it in pursuit of a larger goal. I spent the past 4 years of my life dedicated to something called regenerative agriculture and trying to promote, was that a whoop? Do we got a regenerative agriculture fan out there? All right, permaculture. Nice. Yeah, so I was out, spent the past 4 years working for the Organic Consumers Association, consumer advocacy group representing about 3 million organic consumers, food cooperatives, farmers around the globe and the United States. And we helped to launch another organization called Regeneration International in 2015. And the purpose of this organization was to promote the benefits of regenerative organic food and agriculture as a solution to climate change. So I'm here to share with you some facts and figures that should inspire sort of both fear, but in the end, a sense of hope, which I think we're missing a great deal of the time when it comes to climate change and a lot of the issues that my generation and I think all of us on the earth today are going to be faced with over the next 50 years. So the first is the connection between food and climate. In 2015, I actually, our organization, along with about 80 activists, academics, and even entrepreneurs from around the globe, went to the Paris Climate Summit. The outcome of the Paris Climate Summit, although right now is kind of a different deal, as the current administration has decided to pull the United States out of the Paris Climate Accord. But even despite that, before Trump, we would still actually be in a pretty rough spot. I think there's a lot of optimism coming out of Paris. A record number of countries signed the accord and made agreements to reduce their emissions to keep global temperatures to about 2 degrees Celsius or about 1.5, which is the pre-industrial levels. The only issue is that it was fully reliant on emissions reductions and the use of renewables. But if by some miracle every single country was able to meet those goals, we would actually still only be at 50% of the emissions reductions that we needed to keep ourselves to those temperatures. If we meet the Paris Climate Accord as it is set right now, we would actually be reaching 4.4 degrees Celsius, so double the amount that is set forth in the Paris Climate Accord. And that is because the Paris Climate Deal was relying primarily on the fact that over the next 50 years, we are going to develop a number of different technologies to help reduce carbon or sequester carbon. Many of these are referred to as geoengineering, which is a term that a lot of people sort of view with a sense of fear and trepidation. And some of that is well-founded, because a lot of the ideas put forth by leading scientists, diplomats, involve hundreds of billions of dollars, installation of space mirrors, or climate seeding, so spraying chemicals or minerals into the air to recreate rain or to block sun's rays. And all of these silver bullet solutions have the potential to ricochet and to cause unforeseen climate effects and environmental damage, as well as damage to our general health and well-being. There's one solution that has been overlooked for a long time. And really until over the past 10 years, the scientific community did not really understand the impact that agriculture has on climate, nor its potential to help undo much of the damage that has been done by food and agricultural production over the past 1,200 years. And that is what brought me to the Paris Climate Summit, to start promoting regenerative agriculture on a global scale as a solution to climate change. So regenerative agriculture works with nature. Rather than fighting pests or weeds or the weather, regenerative agriculture actually looks to mimic natural systems in a way that will result in much more productivity. An example of this would be a little known fact. There's actually more bison roaming North America prior to humans' arrival to this continent than there are currently cattle, heads of cattle in the United States, which we oftentimes vilify the industrial food system because we see these images of cows in paddocks covered in their own feces and just all the antibiotics that we must use to keep them healthy enough, long enough for us to slaughter them. But there is another solution out there, which is to actually start moving our livestock and handling our farms in a way that replicates nature, replicates the way that bison are moving across the pastures. And in these ways, we actually start to restore rather than degrade the soil around us. In 2017, the UN said that we have about 60 harvests or 60 years left of land-based farming at the current rates of soil degradation. The US is losing 1.7 billion tons of soil organic carbon every single year. And we have one of the most high-tech systems of agriculture in the world. So if we look at the impacts that the way that we are growing food are having on the planet today, we need to look for greater solutions. The UN has also said that about 1/2 of all climate emissions, so that includes from the transportation industry, from the steel and concrete industry, from the oil and gas industry, 1/2 of all global emissions are actually from the food system. So how do we do this? We need to feed 2.5 billion people by 2050, and yet we need to reduce our emissions by half, going beyond all the extremely stringent standards set by global diplomats and governments. Well, we can do this through regenerative agriculture by replicating these food systems. And it's a solution that's not only immediately actionable. 80% of the world's food is actually grown by small farmers who are using one or two of this toolbox of regenerative farming practices or systems on their current farms. And they're low tech. They can be taught quite easily through workshops, through books, honestly, through online activism. And these can be implemented in a way that will not only increase the resilience of these farmers to climate change, but also increase their productivity. Because really, in order for a solution to stick, it has to make sense for the farmers themselves. There's one example I like to reference. They're out of California. They call themselves Boots and Birkenstocks. And these are ranchers that started to implement regenerative farming practices, something known as holistic management or rotational planned grazing. So they're moving their cattle in a way that mimics bison. And in that process, they've restored riparian wetlands that they hadn't seen since their great-grandfather. This in turn brought in endangered species of frogs and salamanders and bird species they hadn't seen on their land for generations. That in turn led them to get funding from the Sierra Club and start to work more closely rather than against environmentalists in the region. And so we now have these groups of people that at one point were enemies, realizing the financial, environmental, and social well-being of working with nature to produce a more productive society rather than against it. And it's something that I think that we should all take a step back and realize that even though you may not be a farmer, if you are, please see me afterwards and let's talk about how we can improve the regenerative capabilities of your land. But as a consumer, we have more power than ever. There are more companies starting to adopt regenerative agricultural practices. That ranges from the large ones, such as General Mills, who recently launched a single line of regenerative macaroni, to the standard bearers of corporate activism, such as Patagonia, and Dr. Bronner's, who's actually sponsoring this event today. And all of these companies are working together to ensure that we can not only provide sustenance for ourselves and our families, but also to protect the precious planet that we have with us today. So I just would like to encourage all of you to remember that connection between food and the climate, and to realize that every purchase you make can have an impact. And so here today, especially at United We Stand, I think we need to realize that every purchase is a vote for the world that you would like to see tomorrow and the next day. And would like to thank you all for the time and opportunity to present. Thank you.